Hey, I'm Tuffy Stone, head pitmaster of Cool Smoke, also the name of my cookbook, and owner of Tuffy Stone Barbecue Provisions. I've been fortunate enough to win 6 overall grand championships on the barbecue circuit. We won the Jack Daniels Invitational 3 times, Memphis in May, American Royal Invitational, and Open. And there's probably 2 guiding lights for me when it comes to cooking great barbecue, whether it's in the backyard, restaurant, catering, or on the circuit. One is getting meat perfectly tender, that right chew. The other thing is smoke. I like to treat smoke like salt and pepper. I want the right amount of smoke. I want good smoke. And so I'm going to do a deep dive right now into how I manage a fire when I'm cooking on an offset pit. To me, this is probably one of the biggest struggles that I had when I first got into barbecue, why I was making bad barbecue, why my neighbor Sue Brown didn't like it, because it was over-smoked and it was bitter and it was off-putting. I don't care if we're cooking on a big offset or a little offset. The tips and the tricks that I'm going to share with you now, I think will help you control your fire in a better way, make the cooking experience better, and make the smoke a very pleasant backdrop flavor to whatever meat we're cooking. So the first thing that I want to discuss are some of the tools that I use when I am smoking on an offset pit. Now, this pit happens to be very large, but actually the techniques that I'm going to share with you today and how I run a fire works great on a big pit, but it works even better on a small offset. So if you've only got an offset that might be 36 inches long, small cooking chamber, small firebox, this is really going to benefit you. So let's just talk about the tools that I use when I'm cooking with fire on an offset pit. I have got some really great wood. I'm going to do a deep dive into the fuel, but you need fuel. You're going to need your offset cooker or whatever cooking apparatus that you're going to use. I am going to start by loading 1 chimney full of charcoal and lighting that. Some of the other tools that I use a wood splitter. So I have an electric log splitter. I also have a manual log splitter, and this is really great. I've got a small sledgehammer. I'll have a hatchet or an axe to help split wood if I need be. I will use welding gloves to help manage the fire process, so this will insulate my hands from the heat. I've got tongs that are dedicated for moving these logs around. These are little pieces of wood that I'm using. This is a big old pit, but I can get a little teeny fire going with little pieces of wood. It's going to bring it up to the desired cooking temperature, whether that's 200 or 300, and these tongs are just perfect for managing these pieces of wood. So just not that much. Inside the pit is a water pan. That's another tool. I'll speak to that, and moisture. That'll be another section of this video. I bought my first offset back in 2004. I'd started off in a French kitchen learning how to make all these hard to pronounce, fancy, expensive foods. And my wife and I had a catering company that we had grown to where I wasn't cooking anymore. I was just managing the business. So barbecue for me was really just a new culinary activity to get into, to reconnect as a cook or a chef. So I bought a barbecue pit and I got some hickory and I made a rub and I got some pork butts. I seasoned these pork butts up. I built a fire. I put all these pork butts on this pit, and I ruined a big old load of meat. And it was so humbling to me. And I think probably one of the biggest mistakes that I made, and probably many people make when you first start making barbecue, is we oversmoke the meat. Because we got this fire going and you got all this smoke coming out of the stack and you're sitting back and you got a cold beer in your hand. I was like, man, I'm smoking now. And I read a book by author, a really well-known pitmaster named John Willingham. And John Willingham, in his book, he wrote, "Smoke is dirt." I'm paraphrasing. He said, we're cooking, we're not smoking. And I really hung on those words. And I became obsessed with watching the fire and trying to get it to breathe and trying to run clean smoke, get pretty smoke. John Marcus, who was the creator of a show I used to do called Barbecue Pitmasters, John called me up one day and he was going to do a sizzle for the show. And John said, you know, Tuffy, I've cast your role as the professor. And you can talk for hours on smoke and wood and fire. And I stepped back and I thought about it. I was like, yeah, John, you're right, I can. But I just became really obsessed with trying to run a clean fire. And if there's one thing that I hope to achieve in conveying and teaching in this video is how to manage a good fire, how to manage a fire that generates heat, and then a nice, pleasant, smoky taste that backs up the pork or the brisket or the chicken. So I listened to John Willingham, Smoke is Dirt. I was adjusting, trying to get airflow. A fire that breathes is really important. And so I'm obsessing over trying to manipulate this fire the right way. And one weekend I was in Great Bend, Kansas, and we were cooking back-to-back contests. We were cooking a KCBS contest, and then we were cooking a contest called Chest to Chest, which is a brisket contest. And the wind was blowing so hard out there that on the second day of the cook, I moved my rig around and tried to create a wall with my RV to shield my smokestack from the wind because it was just chewing up so much wood. And I started to run out of wood, and I thought I'd come with plenty of wood, but the reality was, because of the wind, I was using much more than I needed. And I was fortunate. There was a vendor there that was selling wood. Well, I was cooking with logs that are about 18 inches long, something you might put in your fireplace, and they were bigger logs. And then all of a sudden, I had no choice. I had to buy wood, so I got these 10-inch logs. And what I found in this process is it was so much easier to manage a clean burning fire with these shorter pieces of wood. So I'm not stupid. I went home and I got a chop saw. And so I would get my wood from my wood guy, and I would cut these 18-inch logs in half and get them to about 9 inches. And then from there, I could split them and get them to be the perfect size piece of wood to where when I build a fire, I do it log cabin style. So you're gonna see in a minute, I'm gonna light a chimney full of charcoal. Once it's burning good, I'm gonna dump it in the bottom of the firebox. And then I am gonna start to place logs in this fashion. I call it log cabin style. We're gonna have 2 like that, 2 like this, 2 like this. And what that does is I have these airflow. A fire that does not breathe is gonna create creosote, and it's gonna be bitter, and it's gonna be off-putting. I've got this coin phrase that I created called the stereotypical expected flavors of barbecue. Well, what does that mean? Well, when I first got into barbecue coming from a French kitchen, I used to think, man, white truffle salt and demi-glace will be good on brisket. And they are, but don't take that to a barbecue competition. So the stereotypical expected flavors of barbecue for me are things like, first of all, the meat needs to be the star, salt, pepper. You'll see ingredients like vinegar in sauces. You'll see sugar, so tangy, sweet, spicy, salty, and smoke. So smoke is one of those flavors that is expected to taste when having barbecue, but it needs to be a pleasant background smoke. My next door neighbor, if she was here, I could bring her and she could speak to it. I used to bring barbecue to Mrs. Brown, and I'd say, Miss Brown, I got some barbecue for you. And she was so gracious. She loved it. And I kept doing that. And one day I knocked on Miss Brown's door, and Miss Brown said, you know, Tuffy, I still got some of the last barbecue that you made. And it struck me. Miss Brown didn't want my barbecue. Why? Because it was over smoked. So a fire that breathes is going to be really crucial in making better barbecue. So I've just lit my chimney full of charcoal. Some people will say, why do you use charcoal to start your fire? It's just super easy for me. We could use kindling to get the fire going if we wanted to. We just be a little bit more work. I can, grab a bag of my favorite charcoal, fill the chimney up and light it, and it's done. With kindling or something like that, it's a little bit of work. We're gonna have to split it into smaller pieces. When I first got into cooking with the offset pit back in 2004, I'm from Virginia. We have a lot of apple orchards. I thought I would cook my barbecue with applewood. Applewood is a nice, pleasant, mellow smoke. We've got plenty of apple orchards not too far away from where I live. And so I thought that was gonna be the wood I would use. But the reality was I couldn't get a steady supply of applewood, but I could get hickory all the time. So this is hickory. A lot of people will say that hickory can be a little bit stronger flavored cooking wood. not the way I run a fire. You're gonna see, once we get this fire going, the stack's not even gonna have any visual smoke really coming through it because we're letting that fire breathe. If we look around at barbecue and all the different styles of barbecue and regions of barbecue, it's gonna usually be the wood that you use is the wood that's close by. Harvesting trees, splitting the wood is all a lot of work. You know, when I was in Australia, I think ironbark is one of the woods that they had over there, and but they had different trees there. If we go down to Texas, some people are using post oak, some areas are using pecan, oak. For me, hickory became my steady supply wood. I can also occasionally get some oak, every now and then some pecan. This wood here, it's been cut into about 9-inch pieces. There's no bark on it. This is wood that is very precious or precise because this was wood that I actually had for Memphis in May. So I was very particular about that. In my restaurants, when I had my barbecue restaurants, some of my pieces of wood would have bark on there. The most important thing is airflow, letting that fire breathe. So when it comes to fuel, cooking all wood fire on an offset or a fire or a pit that we can fuel with all wood, it's the wood that's close by. It's the wood that's accessible to you, cutting it the right size, letting that fire breathe. Your fruit woods are going to be a milder smoke. Woods like hickory and pecan and oak can be a milder smoke as long as that fire is allowed to breathe. Something that I didn't speak to is seasoning wood, which is when we cut wood fresh, it's green, it's got a lot of moisture in there, and it's a more difficult fire to run. This wood here has no moisture content really at all because it was kiln dried. If I have any moisture in there, it's usually about 15 to 20%, but the drier the wood, the easier the fire. So the size of the wood. Sometimes I can take little teeny pieces of wood like this, and I can get that fire running cleaner, hotter by smaller pieces of wood. I'm gonna have to add wood more frequently because it burns up faster, but smaller pieces of wood can a lot of times be your friend, especially on a small offset, even on this big one. This wood is fairly well seasoned, so I'm gonna use this hand splitter here. I've got an electric splitter. I can even take that again. These little pieces of wood, and again, we're always creating gaps. We want air and oxygen to go through there. It's gonna make for a nicer, tastier barbecue, but we want airflow. So this is just a simple little splitter. It's super sharp. I've got the electric one that I can use for larger pieces of wood, but just know that we don't have to have, some people don't like to play with their fire. Some people want to get sleep, and sleep is important to barbecue, but some people put these big old logs on a fire and then they go back to sleep for an hour. Well, sometimes those fires just don't breathe, and it just creates all this harsh smoke, and so your barbecue's not going to be as good. The little offsets, little pieces of wood, I'm just telling you, you're going to have better barbecue. It's going to taste better. Your neighbors are going to, Miss Brown, she wishes I had learned this about 3 years before I did. I was cooking in Kansas City one day at a barbecue competition, and it was raining all day. I mean, it was just pouring down rain, and we had to keep this under cover. I constantly was taking a squeegee and getting the water off of, it wasn't this pit, it was my other pit called the Grill Vet, which was the one I used on Barbecue Pitmasters. But it was just raining so much, and that day we turned in our pork shoulder entry, and we went to awards, and we got a 180, a perfect score, and we took first place in pork, and that was my first ever perfect score in pork, and I was so happy. It was probably one of the most thrilling wins that I'd ever had. Anyways, I was thinking about it, and my pork was just so daggone good that day, and I thought, you know what, I've kind of felt a little silly because it took me so long to realize, but I realized, you know, my barbecue's better when it rains. And it had to do with my cooking apparatus, and it had to do with this offset. And once it struck me that my barbecue was better on rainy days when there's a lot of moisture in there, I thought to myself, I'm gonna figure out how to make it rain all the time. So one of the things that I did is I now put a water pan. I've been doing this since I think 2005. I put a water pan right where the heat comes from the firebox into the cooking chamber. As that water gets hot, it's going to create a little bit of moisture that's going to be in that cooking chamber. Another way that I make it rain all the time is I come in with a spray bottle and I spritz with either water, apple juice. Some people use apple cider vinegar. I'll use pineapple juice on chicken. As that meat develops a crust and gets a little bit of bark on there, I just come in with an occasional mist, not a stream, but a mist, and I'll just spritz. And between the water pan and the spray bottle, I get a better barbecue on an offset pit. So if you get a pit for the very first time, especially an offset, we want to know how the heat travels in these pits. Now, Jamie Gear does a really great job of making this cooking surface all usable. But all that being said, and it was Jamie Gear that shared this with me back when I bought my first pit from him back in 2005, and it's called the biscuit test. Now, some people, they don't want to spend that much money. They don't want to buy biscuits. So some people will use slices of bread. But the idea is this. We're going to get this pit up to the cooking temperature of, let's just say 275, 300 degrees. This is what you do when you get your first pit. And then we're going to open this up. And we're going to put all over the cooking surface these biscuits. And we're going to just do like a grid from left to right, front to back. And we're going to close the lid. And we're going to let this pit run for about, 10 minutes or so. And when we open it up, we're going to see how the biscuits brown. And for the most part, and I've done this on this pit before, for the most part, they brown all evenly, but it gets a little lightly browner or slightly browner over on this side, a little bit on the back, and a little bit on this edge where the firebox is. I take that information, it's so visual, and I use that to place meats. So I think if you can understand how your heat is in your pit, it's not a bad thing. So I will put my larger butts or my larger briskets in the warmer spots of the cooking chamber, and I'll put my smaller cuts in areas that might not be quite as hot. The money muscle on a pork butt, such a go-to piece for competition barbecue. It's the top of the shoulder. It's also called the copa. Well, if we cook that copa perfectly, it's probably undercooked down here. So what I'll do is I'll take the copa, put that in a slightly cooler part of the pit, and then put the denser part of the pork shoulder in the hotter part, and hopefully it all comes together so that my copa is perfectly cooked and some of the denser part of the pork shoulder is thicker. But the biscuit test, bread, whatever you want, it's just a really nice visual way to learn your heat travel in a pit that might be new to you. So my charcoal has gotten going good. Again, this is just going to be what I use to get my fire started with this cooker. So I'm now going to, with gloved hands, go into my charcoal chimney, dump the coals right in the center, and I am going to start to place my wood in there log cabin style. Now, for me, when I'm cooking my barbecue, I'm going to build my fire a little bigger to start because I want to get a good base of coals, and I usually give myself about an hour to do that. Pull your meat out, go to your firebox, get your pit going. It's going to take about 1 hour. So while your meat's sitting out ambient temperature on the counter, your pit's coming up to temperature, having that meat just kind of come out and sit room temperature for an hour is going to make for a good barbecue. So Jay, the camera guy, who makes all these wonderful videos, Jay, you're going to be, we just put that on, what, 2 minutes ago? We just put that wood on 2 minutes ago. He nodded his head. Y'all can't see it, but he did. Anyways, watch how quickly this pit gets to where that stack is clean. And if we come over here, little teeny fire just got going. We're already at 225 on the pit. We're going to go to 275. I give myself an hour, but really on this pit, I don't need an hour. But this, I've been so blessed in the world of barbecue. To me, if I'm coming across passionate, it's because these were the lessons I learned. This is why Miss Brown didn't like my barbecue. This is how I got better for me. It's running this fire. By having the wood cut the right size, having good wood, I don't fight the fire anymore. And it's just so much easier. And so if you're ever frustrated, just make the wood smaller, get airflow. All right, let's see. All right, we're 260 now. Let's see. Oh, look at the stack. this is not, I mean, we can cheat this video any way we want. This is real time right now. It's 4 minutes since we put that wood on. Look at that stack. Let's go inside. This is how we can really tell whether there's smoke in the pit or not. Look at that. See, if this was a smoky fire right now, if this was a smoky fire right now, you would see it in here. Let's go back to the firebox again. I mean, look at that. All right, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. Door open, door closed. I cook with it open, I cook with it closed. I can make this fire as big as small as I want. Airflow is so important. I can't say that enough. How we place these logs, how we let it breathe, airflow is everything. So if my pit was getting hot on me, I'm either gonna make the fire smaller or I'm gonna reduce airflow. That damper over there on the exhaust, in normal plumbing world, that would be closed, but Jamie likes to mess with you. So that is wide open right now. I got the intake wide open. I got a lot of air blowing through here. I told you I give myself an hour to get my pit right. I got a bigger fire than I normally would because I want these coals to get established. Generally speaking, with this pit, with my wood, I have to add 2 pieces of wood about every 15 minutes. The bigger the log, you're gonna get a longer burn, and if you were cooking on a gigantic 1,000 gallon smoker, it'd be a bigger fire. But my guess is I could take a 1,000 gallon offset smoker and come in with little wood and still get that pit up to temp. Anyways, treat smoke like salt and pepper. We want that smoke to be there. But we don't want that to be the thing that just first thing you get is a punch of smoke. We want it to be like pleasant and pleasing. And we don't want that smoke to you don't want to belch smoke after you eat barbecue. Look at that, man. Look at that stack. Anyways, it's so easy. Anybody, if I can do it, anybody can do it. It's easy. All right, this is crazy. And I mean, we dumped the charcoal, I don't know, 8 minutes ago. My pit's knocking over 350 right now with that little teeny fire. But I talked about the biscuit test earlier, so now I'm gonna demonstrate it. I feel a little silly. I mean, I was trained in a French kitchen and we made bread and but anyways, I grew up on tube biscuits. So these are the kind that we just crack it on the corner and we get the biscuits out. I don't know how many biscuits are in there, but we are gonna put evenly spaced biscuits on the cooking chamber, left to right, front to back, and we're gonna close it and we're gonna let these things cook for about 10 minutes. Then we're gonna raise it up and we're gonna see how they colored. And that's gonna just be a visual representation of how the heat flows on this offset. But big ones, little offsets, big offsets, it doesn't matter. This is a great way to visually understand the heat travel in your pit. Jamie Gear taught me this when I bought my first pit from him back in 2005. I don't know who taught him, but it's been done for a very long time. I've had so many mentors in barbecue. Just been really fortunate to have a lot of teachers and people that shared insight with me. But Amy Mills one time, I was listening to her speak at the National Barbecue Association conference, and she said in her speaking to always give credit to the author, to give credit to where credit's due. And so I try and really do it. There's some things that I have come up with on my own that are my own original thoughts and concepts, but I've had so many people that have shared their insight and their knowledge with me. In fact, competition barbecue, the only reason I got into competition barbecue was to learn about barbecue. I didn't even realize that there was a competition circuit. But once I did, I thought, well, I want to learn how to make barbecue. I figured there's going to be some people there that know how to make it at a barbecue contest. And so that was the only reason I went. Lynchburg, Virginia, 2004, September. I went there to learn. Johnny Trigg won the contest. I didn't even know who Johnny Trigg was. I do now, but anyways, I'm still learning. And anyways, I get windy. So not as windy maybe as my fire right now, but pretty windy. So our pit's been running pretty hot, about 350 degrees Fahrenheit. I got a little bitty fire generating a lot of heat. It's clean smoke, but we did the biscuit test. So I have just spread out on the cooking surface in a grid pattern, 2 biscuits that you can buy in the store. If you don't want to do biscuits, you can do slices of bread. And this is something that I like to do when I get a pit and I'm cooking on it for the very first time. So let's just see how the heat traveled. And let's keep in mind, I have run a hot fire. So it's a little bit browner right there, but not too bad. And actually, if I'd run a smaller pit, you know, and I usually don't cook at 350 anyways. If I was cooking at 300 degrees, it wouldn't be really that brown here. But you can see this whole cooking surface is just really pretty evenly distributed as far as the heat goes. If you did have a hot spot, you can use this visual information to put your bigger cuts in the hotter part of the pit. I also put a water pan there to bring in moisture, which I spoke about earlier in this video. But Jamie does a really nice job with heat travel, heat transfer. The biscuit test is just a super simple way when you get a pit to understand the heat travel and then use that information as you cook all your meats. So if I ever go into a hushed tone, it's because to me it's really important. This is really not a recipe. This is a technique. This technique, this process made my barbecue better. I suspect that anybody out there that's struggling with how to run the fire, how to manage the temperature in their pit, how to make that barbecue taste good. I want to treat smoke like salt and pepper. I want the rub, the sauce, and the smoke to be complementary backdrop flavors to whatever it is that I'm cooking. The bigger the cut, the more smoke. The smaller the cut, the less smoke. Little pieces of wood for me, once I discovered that, a fire that breathes is going to generate the heat I need, but not have a harsh, bitter smoke. A fire that we choke down, doesn't get enough oxygen, is going to create creosote. It's going to be off-putting. You're not going to like that barbecue. Whoever you serve it to is not going to like that barbecue. So for me, the fundamental focus point when it comes to making better barbecue is fire management, clean fire, fire that breathes, and then trying to get that perfect tenderness in whatever it is that I'm cooking.